All right, welcome to the First Class Podcast. I'm here with my man Jay Boogie Jawan. What's up, man?
What's going on? What's going on? We have one of the most low-key builders in the Stacks ecosystem. If you've minted an NFT on stacksnft.com, we have the founder of that platform, Jamil Denani. How you doing?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me on here, Juwan, Courtney.
Awesome,
Anytime.
Well, we were chopping it up just now, and I mean, we've known each other for a little while now, but I think it would be helpful to just tell the people who are listening, who are watching, a little bit about your background and how you got into crypto, how you got into NFTs.
Yeah, for sure. So I remember I had never really been deeply into crypto. You know, my first exposure to programming, to computer science was in the early days of the App Store. That was really what was exciting when I was first getting into this space. Everybody was building an app, everybody was doing something there. And that was back when, you know, the App Store had like 20,000 apps, you know, and that's when I first started, you know, coding and programming. Now it has 4 million apps, you know, and I thought it was saturated at 20,000. So, you know, you just saw this explosion of creativity and explosion of use cases. And then I ended up working at Apple for 4 years as a machine learning engineer after graduating college. But now I get that same sort of feeling in crypto as I did in the, you know, after the iPhone was first released. It's this explosion of possibilities, this explosion of use cases, and you are still so early, you know, despite what it feels like, despite all the hype, you're still in this early stage. And so I love that excitement, that sense of optimism, and all the use cases that are coming out, and people like you that are both building, communicating. It just reminds me of that excitement and optimism and the explosion of use cases that we saw in those days.
Man, not too many people can say that they've worked at the Apple, you know. So 2 questions. When you're doing machine learning, what kind of languages are you programming with? And like when somebody starts out, you said you kind of started with the App Store and transitioned. Did some of those things transfer over from like building apps to doing machine learning, or was it like, you know, completely different languages and completely different syntax and completely different learning curve?
I think the languages, you know, there are things that often stay the same. With when I was first writing apps, the language was Objective-C. It looks very different to what you use mostly in machine learning, which is Python, but you can get used to it. You can jump from language to language to language. I think it's generally the difference in like how you think about problems. And I really like that, you know, moving from building apps to building ML models to now writing smart contracts is like 3 completely different ways of thinking. And I think that's what appeals to me about the technical side as well. It's like when you're writing an app, you just, you know, need to put the UI components together, hook up the logic, call the right APIs. With machine learning, it's very much like trying different experiments. It feels like more of a science lab. You know, you don't know whether something will work or not, but you'll just try it, right? And experiment and iterate on your different models, iterate on your hyperparameters. And then with smart contracts, it's completely different, right? It's like you have to make sure all of your code is super secure, super minimal, super efficient, and just a completely different way of thinking. So more than the differences in the language, it's more the difference in the mindset that changes between these 3 things.
When you first got into smart contracts, did you start with Solidity, which is the Ethereum smart contracts, or did you start off in Stacks with Clarity?
Yeah, I started off with Solidity. That was my first exposure to smart contracts. The first thing that I wrote in Solidity was actually, not a lot of people know this, but the Associated Press, which is one of the largest news organizations in the US, publishes election data to the blockchain. So every time a race is called on like whether Trump wins or whether, you know, Biden wins, they actually publish that information to the blockchain. Not many people know that the AP does this, and like one of the largest news organizations actually is publishing the race calls to the blockchain. So I built a website to sort of show that data and show you like a map based on the AP race calls, and writing smart contracts to store historical election data. That was my first exposure to smart contract programming. And it was a nice, fun little experiment to, you know, figure out what the basic patterns were and to just get started.
Man, That is a nugget that I did not know.
I did not know.
Hey, so cool on. Can I ask this? Like, you talked about the 3 different kind of stages or phases of, I guess, your programming career.
Yeah.
Do you think that you could just jump in and would have been able to start from the ground floor at that last stage doing smart contracts and been able to do some of the things that you're doing now? Or did you build on skills that you already had from, doing Python and doing, what'd you call it, C or something like that?
Yeah.
Like, do those build on each other in any way? Or did you have an advantage? I guess that's what I'm saying, from doing the other experiences.
They do. It's a lot faster to pick, every new skill that you do, it gets a little bit easier and gets a little bit faster, your ramp up time. But to anybody listening to this podcast, like, that shouldn't exclude you from diving into smart contracts today. Anybody, I would encourage anybody, it's a lot easier to start building than you think it is. The barrier is a lot lower than it was, 20 years ago. There's so much information, so many resources out there for you to get started writing smart contracts. Just play around with it, do it. It's really fun to just be able to try new things, get started. And if you make mistakes, just try again. It's that's part of the fun of it. Yeah.
And for those who may be interested in getting into smart contracts or learning more, would you be able to explain the difference between Solidity smart contracts and Clarity smart contracts for those who may not know?
Yeah, I think, well, first, it's worth mentioning that there's probably a bigger gap between programming in the conventional sense when you're writing an app or whatever, and blockchain development. The jump between Solidity and Clarity is not that big. There's a lot of differences, but as long as you're familiar with the patterns, you'll be able to jump between one and the other pretty quickly. That being said, Solidity is a very, it looks a lot similar to a language like C. It generally looks like that. And it's what you call a Turing complete language. That means anything that can be computable, you can write in Solidity. That generally sounds like a good thing, right? Why wouldn't you want to have a language that can compute anything that's computable? But Clarity is actually more restrictive. It's intentionally more restrictive because with smart contract development, it's easy to make mistakes, to have vulnerabilities, to have infinite loops, programs that just go on forever. And Clarity sort of restricts that a little bit more and makes it safer, makes it a little bit more deterministic how your programs execute. It also looks slightly different. So whereas Solidity is similar, looks like C or Python or something like that, Clarity looks more like a language that's called Lisp, which is a very old language. It's very different. So it's not something a lot of programmers are generally used to. They get intimidated by it first, but it's really the same sort of patterns.
Awesome. And I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like I've seen less hacks on the Stacks ecosystem as opposed to Ethereum. And would that be because of, well, obviously it's not as big as Ethereum as far as people that are in the ecosystem, like with NFTs and whatnot, but would that be also due to the fact that Clarity is kind of more restrictive in the smart contracts?
Yeah, I think there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, Clarity is more secure. Number 2, I think there are just fewer hackers in the Stacks ecosystem, and those that are there are very understanding and generally white hat and are going to tell people about issues before raising them, before trying to exploit it. There have only been 1 or 2 big hacks in the Stacks ecosystem. I think the rest have generally been okay. The thing, though, is to make sure that when you're programming Clarity, just like in any language, you can still have bugs, right? And so just because something's written in Clarity and is made on Stacks doesn't mean it's bulletproof. In fact, there was a project a big NFT project with lots of holders, with a huge market cap, with a lot of value, that had a staking contract. And I remember the day after it launched, I usually like reading these smart contracts, just for fun. And I was, hey, this looks
some light reading on the weekend, like a newspaper.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm glad I did, because I thought this looks kind of weird. And I realized that I could have actually stolen all of the NFTs in the staking contract because it had a big bug in it. But like, I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not going to steal all these NFTs. So I just go to I knew who deployed the smart contract. I'm like, yeah, shut this off, and I'll tell you what's wrong.
Wow. I
That's
mean,
so dope. Like,
that speaks to the ecosystem though, for real. I think what I've noticed personally, just like from the outside, and I don't know if it's a result of, stacks being kind of related and adjacent to like that hardcore Bitcoin community that is very like it's very defensive. It's like there's a clear inside and outside, and I feel like Stacks is a group of people who are like descendants of that, who are like, look, let's work together, but let's do it in a way where we can build something and grow something instead of like being on the defensive all the time. So it permeates the culture of the builders, and everybody seems to be like in this altruistic, like, let's work together and build something together. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things about the Bitcoin maxi community is they are really a tight community, but they're very steadfast in their ways, and they tend to like have a bit of an aggressive mentality. When you look on the other end, you have the Ethereum community, which is very open, generally very friendly, but they don't have that same sense of community and understanding that the Bitcoiners do. People are kind of often in the Ethereum ecosystem in it to flip NFTs to make money, but they're very open. And I think Stacks takes the best of both worlds. So you have like the community and the sort of the understanding that the Bitcoiners do with the openness and the friendliness of the Ethereum community. And it sort of strikes this really nice balance where I feel like when I go on Stacks NFT and I look at, who's listing NFTs, who's buying them, like I recognize the names, right? You look at the BTC names and you're like, hey, I know who that person is. It's a really cool feeling, you feel like part of a community.
Yeah, that's true.
I was gonna say, you probably saw me all over the Bitcoin monkey serums for like a week.
This guy, and we had to have a sit down and talk because this guy was going crazy buying everything, sweeping floors. I'm like, there's not a real broom. You can't literally sweep the floor. He's like buying by the 5s and by the 10s. But
that's because Courtney had told me about Bitcoin monkeys at 45 stacks or whatever they minted at, and I never got in, and I regretted that. So.
And I gave him daily updates as it rose to 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350, 400, 450. What is it now? Like
800. And then I was like, okay, now I'm going to get in.
It's all good. It's just a 20 bagger, dude. Don't worry about it. There'll be another one. But hey, talking about NFTs, like, and Stacks as being somewhat of a nascent, like brand new, Stacks 2.0 just hit a year, like a month or two ago, right? And to me, like I'd been in it for about, 4 or 5 months. And it was shocking to me, even though I knew, like it didn't dawn on me how young it was. But what role do you think NFTs and NFT marketplaces like STX NFT, the one that you've built, what kind of role do you think those play in bringing in new users and just kind of growing that ecosystem?
It's kind of been a mindset shift for me because I remember when I first got in this ecosystem, it was around the time that City Coins launched. And that's, so how I first got in this ecosystem. And then it was more like I'm just hacking on things and building things for fun and just build something that's useful for people, right? And you see all of these Stacks accelerator companies and companies that have been part of the Stacks ecosystem. And you're like, oh, these guys, I'll never be able to catch up to them. I'll never be like part of the Stacks ecosystem in a big way. So that mindset shift of suddenly now the smart contract that I deployed that time sometimes is the most called contract in all of Stacks, right? And now it's no longer like, hey, we're this passive player in the Stacks ecosystem. It's more like we have a responsibility also on bringing more people, on educating people, and on growing the ecosystem as a whole. And so I think there's different parts to this. One is making sure that we're making the connections between other companies in the Stacks ecosystem and making sure that like a rising tide lifts all boats. So we just announced a partnership with Alex, the DEX, earlier today, where you can mint NFTs with XBDC. So that brings in a lot of the Bitcoin capital, establishes a partnership with another huge Stacks ecosystem partner, and just helps solidify the ecosystem that we have now. bringing in more people, I think there's two sides to it. There's unlocking the Bitcoin capital, which we're trying to do with the XBDC, which we're trying to do with the Lightning mints, so you can mint with Lightning on some of our collections. And then the other side, which I think we need to focus on too, is helping demonstrate the value proposition of Bitcoin to people that are used to Ethereum and used to Solana. I think in the past, most people who got into crypto, like myself, the first exposure was Bitcoin, right? You get into Bitcoin and then you learn about Ethereum, then you learn about Solana, then you learn about stacks. Now, a lot of the people coming into crypto for the first time are coming in through NFTs, right? And they're coming in through Ethereum. And we need to talk to them too and educate them about Bitcoin and educate them about stacks and show how this is where it all started. This is the most secure settlement layer.
And I couldn't agree with you more, because I was big on Bitcoin. And then, as they say, like, you kind of, you mess with some other tokens for a while, and you dip your nose in some of the candy that is around there, and then you get burned, and you come back to what started you out. You know what I mean? And I definitely I still have some Ethereum NFTs. I don't really have too much Ether.
Mm-hmm.
But like, my bag is heavily Bitcoin, and then I got some stacks, right? Like, but I think that aligns with just my path that I went on as like a quote unquote investor. So like, talking about the Alex relationship that you guys built and that XBTC, like, what is XBTC? It's wrapped Bitcoin, right? Can you talk a little bit about kind of, what that is, what Alex does per se, or just like what a DEX is, and how you think that helps the ecosystem?
Sure. So right now, there's a deep connection between stacks and Bitcoin, but right now there's not really an easy way to use Bitcoin for stacks related transactions like native Bitcoin. The transaction fees are very high on the native Bitcoin chain, and it can often be a little bit hard to make that connection between a Clarity smart contract running on stacks and a Bitcoin transaction. It is possible, but it can be slow and it can be clunky. So we're working on that. But in the meantime, we have this asset called wrapped Bitcoin. So one wrapped Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. And there's a project coming out that will allow you to convert regular Bitcoin to wrapped Bitcoin in an easy and trustless way. So we want to make it easy for people to use Bitcoin as their native asset, to think in Bitcoin. We really don't want to be using stacks as like an asset to transfer our funds and to exchange assets. It should really be Bitcoin that we're doing this settlement on. And so XBDC wrapped Bitcoin is like a first step towards that, until we can get to secure regular Bitcoin transactions on the main chain. A DEX like Alex, what it allows you to do is swap all of these assets in a trustless way. So normally when you go to an exchange, like at a bank, to exchange currencies, you're relying on one central authority to do that exchange for you. But what a DEX allows you, or a decentralized exchange, it allows anybody to provide that liquidity. Anybody can say, I'm going to be the person that provides you the money to facilitate like foreign exchange between tokens, basically. So I can say, hey, if someone wants to exchange XBDC for Ethereum, you can use my money to do it, right? And I think this is it's huge for decentralizing finance. It's no longer in the authority of one person who's facilitating these exchanges. It could be you, it could be me, and or anybody else who chooses to participate.
I'm interested to see, after hearing that, I'm interested to see how many people will actually spend Bitcoin for NFTs, because I know a lot of people like to just hold it, or it's their savings account, right? So I'm interested to see if people actually use Bitcoin to buy NFTs, and if they do, I think that's going to be very, very useful.
Man, like, think about it. The total crypto market, like total crypto market cap, is 1.8 trillion as of yesterday. I don't know if it moves so much that I could be like off by a couple 100 billion, but who knows? But it was like 1.8 trillion. Bitcoin was like 730 billion. and Ethereum was about 300 and some billion, and Stacks was like a billion. You know what I mean? Yeah. So think of how much liquidity is sitting there in Bitcoin. Maybe even 1% of it is ready to go. That's still like 7x all of the liquidity that's in Stacks right now. So I think when they've had a profit, like you're more likely to spend that. I don't know what you think, Jamil.
Yeah, I agree totally. I actually don't expect a lot of people to start using our XBDC mints from day one. But what we want to do is sort of build up these, like that metaphor that's saying, you build the sails, and when the wind comes, you'll be ready, right? And I think that's what we're doing is we're trying to set up the infrastructure so that we're building up these sails. The liquidity isn't all going to come in at once, but we want to be ready, right? We want to build up this structure so that Bitcoiners have access to buy NFTs. They can trade on dexes. We want to make sure that everything is ready to unlock that Bitcoin capital. I mean, those statistics you said, like Bitcoin having something like, what was it, 700 billion, Ethereum at 300. Now that's more than double, right? Bitcoin is double or more than double the market cap of Ethereum. When you look at the NFT trading volume that's happening on Ethereum, it's like $10 billion per year. On Bitcoin, it's like basically zero, right? For DeFi, you look at maybe Ethereum has $150 billion in total value locked, being productive on DeFi exchanges, on things like that. On Bitcoin, again, basically zero. There's so much opportunity to make that capital productive. People may not be used to it today, but we want to make sure we're ready so that as people start to get used to using their Bitcoin more productively, we can just hit the ground running and go.
Man, that's sweet. So you spent 4 years doing ML at Apple. That's one of the biggest machines in all of tech, right? Like they are pretty much, they set the standard in a lot of ways from a product and a marketing standpoint, but I could only imagine on the inside how the policies, procedures, like the way that they run their actual businesses, because they deliver, and they've delivered for a long time. Did you take any lessons away from your time there that helped you as an entrepreneur? Because a lot of people can write code, but you were able to like build a product. Now you run a team. You had to market that product. You had to get users. So like, talk to me a little bit about not just necessarily having a skill, but then parlaying that into actually like shipping a full functional product.
That's a really great question. It's been hard making that transition from an engineer to a founder, but I think there are some things that I've really taken away from my experience there that have helped me a lot in that transition. I think one of them is the product focus, and the design focus. I think a lot of people in crypto come from a very engineer first perspective. And a lot of companies like Google operate that way. They put the engineer at the top. At Apple, often the designer is at the top, right? Everything goes through the design teams. The engineers are there to execute on the vision, right? And I think putting that product focus first, you think of how your users will use this. What is a delightful experience for people? How do you design the best product possible? You don't think about what's cool or what's most technically interesting. You think about what actually is useful to people. And a couple of things stick out for me. I remember a meeting with the human interface team, for example, and my boss was like, he said two things. He's like, this is just, we're going to use ML for this feature, and we're going to use ML for this, and the design team was just like, we don't care, right? Is it good? Right? Does it work? How is this going to be useful to people? And then my boss was just like, well, Samsung has this feature, right? And the design team said, we don't care, or we don't care what any of the competition does, right? It just matters if this is useful. And I think that attitude is missing from crypto a lot of times. We often try to copy what others have done, or we try to think about what's technically the coolest, right? Like, it'd be cool if the smart contract did this. It would be like really decentralized if this happens. And those principles matter, right? Decentralization matters. The technology matters. But in the end, if people don't use it, if the product isn't useful to somebody, it doesn't matter, right? Nobody's going to use it. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I took away from it, is just build something that's useful to people first, right?
Bravo, man. Damn.
Yeah. I agree. You see that a lot in the space, even in the NFT world. Like everybody wants to be like Bored Apes or copy what they did, and that's cool. Like they definitely paved the way. But there's definitely a lot of like copying and like not, just delivering on things that are useful to your community. So I'm really glad that you said that, because it's facts.
Yeah. So you've got this platform up and running. You're got more users coming on, more projects are dropping. From where you stand, you got a different vantage point than the average everyday user. What do you see as some of the building blocks that are necessary to build next? I don't know if that's like an alpha leak or something like that, but like where do you go from here? Like what are the next tools that are needed to help grow the ecosystem and make things easier and better experience for people?
Yeah, I sort of see three pillars here, at least for us on the NFT side. So the first is on the core marketplace product, right? We have a lot to do there still. There's still a lot of features that, for example, OpenSea has that we don't, that we need to build, right? Offers and bidding being a basic one that we're working on right now. Auctions, stuff like that, right? That we just want to figure out a great experience and build those features in a way that makes sense. As part of that, also some of the things around unlocking the Bitcoin capital. So making sure that we can take more of those steps. We did XBTC, we did Lightning. Now, how do we do native Bitcoin transactions? So that's all in the core marketplace product. The second is on the creator side. I think right now, regardless of if you're on Stacks or Ethereum, a lot of times it's quite intimidating to start an NFT project, to start something from scratch, especially if you don't have a technical background. And really, I think what we want to do is we want to make sure that people don't have to rely on engineers or developers to create. Artists and creators just want to unleash their creativity and their potential without having to deal with code or without having to deal with a middleman that's taking, you have to deal with an engineer and our personalities and our, our rates or whatever, right? So we want to focus a lot on creators and how we can enable creators to just put their work out there without having to deal with code. So we have this create portal that we launched, which is the first step toward that, just drag and drop your images. And what's different about this is OpenSea does this in a way where if you deploy an NFT, it's with their smart contract, so they can still manage it. And when you launch an NFT on OpenSea, they can like replace it, they can hide it, they can do whatever they want, right? And what we have tried to do is make it so that when you drag and drop those images and launch your NFT collection, you own it, right? You deploy that smart contract and we can't touch it. You are now the controller of that smart contract and we can't turn it off even if we wanted it to. And I think that's really in the spirit of decentralization, but there's still a lot more tooling that needs to be done on the creator side to make that even easier, to allow for community management and all of these things that just need to be built out, right, for creators.
No, that's crazy. Keep going though. I mean, that I'm gonna ask you something about that after, but keep going.
Sure. And on the third, I think we have a lot to do on the social element as well. So we launched profiles on Stacks NFT, right? And we were the first to support BNS. And until I think last week or the week before, nobody else supported those BTC domains, right? And that's such an important part. Like you're not interacting with an address when you buy an NFT or when you talk to somebody, you're interacting with a person. And I think just showing that handle makes that a little bit more real to people, right? And having a profile where you can show your Twitter, write a bio, you're buying these NFTs and you're showcasing them, but you're not just a dress, you're a person. This is a reflection on you. This is like part of your identity, right? Is your community, the NFTs that you buy. So I think that's a super important part of the platform. So enabling things that strengthen that community on the platform is sort of our third pillar. So that's our core marketplace, which there's still a lot of work to do. The creator services where, we want to enable artists to be able to launch their collections and manage their communities. And then the social and community aspects to sort of bring it all together.
Dude, where's the ballot box? You have my vote. Like, for real. Hey, no, I'll say this. I was going to say something else, but I got to remember I'm going to talk about smart contract. Okay. the fact that y'all added so much to the profiles on stxnft.com, I love it, because one of my favorite, like, just people in the world who makes content is Kobe, and he does this, up only. He's like level 10 just shit poster. I don't know how else to describe it, like, but he has his quote, and I put it as my bio on stxnft. It says, do BSV maxis call 0.0000001 Bitcoin a Craig or a Satoshi? But like, it just gives you a chance to like put your personality out there on your profile. Cause I mean, I got a picture of like a wastelander. It's like a pixelated guy with like glowing eyes and like a goatee and diamond earrings. Like, that's who represents me in this ecosystem. And now I got a place where I can kind of build out that profile. It is almost a social network in a way. Maybe you don't go on there and chat with people, but if you meet somebody in a Discord and you see their .btc name, you could actually look them up and see, how long have they been in the game? What are they collecting? What do they have? And I think that's a cool aspect of it. I want to ask you about smart contracts though.
Sure.
Security is a big thing. So being somebody who's actually can read these things, I haven't tried, but I'm guaranteeing you I would have no idea what the hell's going on if I took a peek. Do you think that smart contracts get to a point where there's a level of standardization where it becomes easier for maybe platforms to just like vet certain contracts and say, we can say with a certain level of certainty that this is a safe contract? Or how do you think the ecosystem, and not Stacks specifically, but just NFTs and DeFi, like, how can we make it so that it's safer for people without bringing in third parties to like be watchdogs?
So I think there's often this saying in crypto that's like, in cryptography, that's like, don't roll your own crypto, right? Don't try to write your own cryptography, like protocols or your own cryptography code, because you're going to make mistakes. And I think the same is often true in smart contracts. There are known bugs, there are known issues, and there are people that have smarter than me that have figured this out, right? And so I think it's not about like, we can make it easier for people to write code. I think that's part of it. But I think we should also create these, and this is what we're trying to do with like the services that we're offering, is create these like little Lego blocks, right? These building blocks that you just know what they do. So this piece of code allows you to like mint an NFT. This allows you to transfer it. This allows you to put a marketplace in, right? And these are like known vetted pieces of code that are being used across the ecosystem in plenty of different projects, right? And so what we do is we want to make tools that allow you to put these like Lego pieces on top of each other and build things that are useful in your own custom way. So that's what we've tried to do with the NFT launch create portal, is like, you can say, okay, I want to have a mint pass, or I want to have like an airdrop, and I want to have these things. And what it's doing is it's putting these pieces together and building up a smart contract with our code, right? That's been thoroughly vetted, thoroughly used out in the space. So you don't have to worry about making those mistakes, but you're just piecing those pieces together to build something that's really your own.
And that speaks to your ethos. So like, don't tell me the recipe, just bake the cake and show me something that tastes good.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for the Stacks ecosystem to, I guess, be held in the same conversation as Ethereum, Solana, what do you think has to happen for it to, be held in, that conversation?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. We can talk about technical things as well, and a lot of people have probably smarter ideas than I do on this, on the technical side. I think unlocking the Bitcoin capital is a big piece of that, right? Making sure that Stacks is the layer for programmable Bitcoin will be huge. But I also think it's kind of a feedback loop too. Like, if you look at Ethereum, a lot of my smart friends are building on Ethereum, right? They're building tools, they're building DAOs, they're building projects that are doing well on Ethereum. And sort of a chain is only as good as the people who are building on it, right? And I think it's not only about engineers, it's about artists too, right? Like all of these artists that you admire, like, you can think of so many on Ethereum that are just there, they like Drift, or, art blocks and all of these different projects. And I think, as good as your technology can be, it's really about the people who are on the platform as well, who are building, who are creating. And I think bringing more of those people like you both, frankly, to this ecosystem is going to be super important.
Hat tip. That's a gentleman. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You almost got us to shill our project on our own podcast. Close. One day.
But yeah, I mean, Jamil, we appreciate your time. Unless there's anything else for you to add, like this has been one of my favorite episodes so far. You dropped a lot of knowledge, and you have the personality to go with it. So we're looking forward to just building with you and seeing everything that you do. And we appreciate you.
Tell the people where they can tap into all the stuff that you built, or where they can follow along on Twitter to catch up with you.
Sure. Yeah. The site is stxnft.com. My Twitter handle is Jamil, Jamil BTC. So at Jamil BTC. I really appreciate you guys having me on. As I said, this is like one of those times in history, like the early days of the App Store, or these early days where it's just so exciting. There's so many possibilities ahead, and it's just such an exciting time to build with you both. So thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man.